Hello and welcome to You've Been Webbed podcast. Now, to lose a child in any circumstance is tragic, but to lose a child due to reckless, careless decisions by corporate bodies is incomprehensible and totally unimaginable. Today's guests have been through this. It's Nicole and Kye, who lost their beautiful 7-year-old boy who was killed by hydrogen cyanide. I'll leave that a while for that to sink in. Hydrogen cyanide, which is the same gas that the Nazis used in their extermination camps in the 30s and 40s. Sorry, that might be a bit heavy, but Nicole and Kye, welcome.
Hi, Eddie.
Thank you.
Before we start, I just want to top and tail this interview with an event that you've got coming up, your march onto Downing Street. Can you give people the details of what's going on with that so people can get involved and where they can get involved? And we'll do it again at the end.
Yeah, thank you very much for that opportunity, Eddie. It's nice and straightforward. We meet at College Green at 10:30 on the 21st of October 2022, which is a few days' time. And that would have been Zane's birthday. So it's very significant. The reason we're meeting there is to deliver a petition of 111,000 people. Maybe that will go up by the time we get there. And it's stand and deliver. So we will have a number of us, the powerful, the famous, people from everyday life that have all come together to support the truth for Zane. And that's all we've ever asked for, the truth. So we arrive 10:30, at 11 o'clock there'll be a rally. And at the rally there'll be speakers. So people will be speaking from Andy Burnham to Nicole and I, to Matt Rack, whose men were there and they discovered the hydrogen cyanide you spoke of, Eddie. And, you know, when you're getting it direct from the horse's mouth, you'll appreciate why I will always say, we're just there for the truth to be recognised. You know, we know what the truth is. We're just there for the truth to be recognised. And so that will be all of us thereafter, after the speeches, arriving at number 10 Downing Street, where we will deliver that petition and to the Prime Minister and urge, as it says on the petition, for Zane to have an independent panel inquiry. And what that inquiry is, just how Hillsborough got the truth. It enables the truth of what happened to be told, and the people that may have been involved in misdirecting and hiding that truth to be exposed to a good extent, so that people can understand, you know, you were actually told what to think, and the real truth all the family have ever asked for is for that to be recognised.
And you've been battling for so long. In fact, you've been battling through what, 4 Tory prime ministers?
Yeah,
4 Tory prime ministers
for our child.
Absolutely, you know, and nothing is being heard. You're not being heard. You're not being supported in any way by this. Oh, I'm so angry. I'm just so angry at this, at what's been going on over the last few years with this corrupt government that are just totally in the pockets of these corporate companies. It's just so. I mean, the last time we was talking at first. The last time we saw each other, we was standing outside a courthouse in, I think it's Surrey somewhere, wasn't it?
Woking,
Woking, Surrey.
In Woking with Tom Sawbrick and everything. And what happened there? Because people have to know this, that you've been doing this defence on your own steam ever since you started this. You've had no legal aid, you've had no help from the government, and you've also been battling against, I don't know what, 6 or 7 barristers paid for by corporate zillionaires. I mean, how are you feeling at the moment about that? It just must be absolutely exhausting.
So break it down in terms of, we are just like you, Eddie, and members of your audience. We're just parents and at that grieving mother and father, and we have the weight of all of this against us, because it's worse than you described there. It was active involvement of authorities. You know, what institutions can do when they turn on us is an example of what's happened to a 7-year-old child, 9 years fighting. I mean, seriously, if you've got to fight for 9 years to get the truth for a child, I'm sure anyone can see there's something seriously wrong.
Yeah.
You know, not something a little bit wrong, there's something seriously wrong. And that manifested in a political decision. So there was a Freedom of Information disclosure, and it stated on the day that Zane died that it was a political decision to determine a false substance, because they didn't want to say the truth. Hydrogen cyanide is the chemical weapon used to kill millions in World War II gas chambers. So we were fighting from the beginning, and it culminated in meeting you before and other people. And as you said, we're on the steps now of what was termed Zane's inquest. And anybody can agree with us that Zane's inquest was a sham. We were denied all representation. You know, we asked for legal aid for representation, just so that we could have somebody that speaks the lingo, the language of law, in order to represent Zane and represent us, but represent Zane, because it's about Zane. Whereas what we found was that there were 6 sets of different authorities that are multi-billion-pound authorities in their own right. Plus, they were also getting funded for their QCs, which enabled them to select the best QCs in the land.
And there's just you and Nicole standing
there. And there's
there.
just us. And David Cameron has said, we don't need any representation. An inquest is a place where you do not need representation. Even the coroner, Eddie, even the coroner had extra legal aid money, which is unusual. You know, a coroner's a person that's an expert. You know, woman
So how,
and
sorry,
man
Kye,
and boy, they're
Sorry,
trained.
Kye, how are people not getting this?
This is...
What is it that people are not getting about this situation?
Yeah, so we live in a world that you really clarified at the beginning, and that is, how do you have parties and you stand up in front of Parliament and say there was no parties?
Yeah.
And what it relies on is that if people are misdirected, it sets their thinking, and they believe what they're being told thereafter. If you additionally lock away the information so that nobody can see or find out what the truth is, you close down investigations, then you end up in a situation where nobody gets to know what the real truth is. We are fortunate. Lots of people will say, oh, Kye and Nicole believe it was hydrogen cyanide. It's never been that, Eddie. It's the facts.
I know that, and that's what I want to come into.
Here.
That's what I want to come into.
Yeah.
So, Nicole, take us back to the February 2014 and the lead up to this tragedy.
So we live by the Thames, and the house had a flood basement. So the water as the water table rises, the water comes up through the soil into the basement and then disperses as the water goes down when the floods have cleared. And so that wasn't unusual. We'd seen the floods getting worse over January, and we'd got electric pumps that were submersible in the basement, and they were, you can never reduce the water table.
You were given these pumps? You were given these pumps, or you had these pumps?
No, we purchased the pumps and we hired pumps, and as long as we were maintaining the water levels, the house was habitable. We'd done what anybody did in this area, is we raised anything precious upstairs, and we put things on bricks and on top of tables. As you can imagine, it was chaos, but it was organised chaos. And we were defending our castle, Eddie. You know, we were doing what everyone was doing in the neighbourhood. You know, we all rallied round. There was a big camaraderie. You know, there was some elderly in mobile homes up the road, and they weren't able to get their medication, and so Kye and
then Zane, come the floods.
Yes. So it was, you know, they'd come and then they'd go for a few weeks, and then they came back again in the February. So by then we'd got quite a little you know, process going. We had candles in strategic places around the house in case the electricities went, and it was organised chaos, as I say, Eddie.
So in front of your house there was a landfill site.
Yeah, so unbeknownst to us, abuts the neighbouring property is a landfill site from the 30s. That was commandeered during the Second World War to test tanks and ammunitions on the land. But we knew none of this. It didn't show up in our searches. It didn't show up in any of the searches of the neighbours. But what we did find out afterwards is that, and sorry, I should also mention that when Zane died, they said to the BBC went to them and asked them about the landfill, and they went on record and made a statement that it's not a landfill site. And they went on to say, and don't cause hysteria. You know, they batted them away, and the BBC came back to them and said, oh, well, look, we've got evidence here that it is a landfill site. And then they said, okay, it is a landfill site, but we, you know, our condolences to the parents, and we are working with the necessary authorities. You know, that standard statement that gets churned out. And so, yes, it was a landfill site from the 30s. It had experimental tipping. These are all things that we have subsequently found out. And what makes this the difference between it being a catastrophic event of, you know, circumstances to being far more sinister, Eddie, is that we found out that the property next door to us, owned by the Environment Agency, and this is all evidence, this is all, you know, is owned by the Environment Agency. And 4 years before Zane was taken from us, they had reports showing migrating gases, and I'm using the terminology from the reports, Eddie, migrating gases that will cause serious harm or death. And the recommendation was to remediate the land. This is land that we didn't know was landfill. They did. And this is a statement and this report, they put in planning permission to do an extension, a lockkeeper's relief cabin. And they were told that it was too costly to remediate the land. And so what they did is they put gas-proof membranes in their own property to protect themselves and future occupants. And of course, we were all unaware of that. You know, we could not make informed decisions. Had we have known, you'd have got out. And they could have even, you know, evacuated us without us even knowing anything about the landfill, but we'd still be alive. So
the rain come down, it hit this landfill site, it flooded, and it flooded your house. But so unbeknownst to you, there's content of hydrogen cyanide in these things. Now, you obviously are trying to pump this water out, and Zane is around there, and Kye is around there, and the thing that I just found so haunting is that they found you and Kye unconscious next to Zane at some point, did they not?
Over to you, Kye. I it's just too raw for me, Eddie.
Yeah,
so
I'm sorry. I just want people to understand this red tape that you're going through, and how these people in authority are just sort of not taking this for what it is, sort of thing.
I can.
Does that make sense? Like I said to you earlier on, Nicole, there's just so much involved in this case. To take it all in is just crazy, you know. It's not crazy, but it's just like living in one of those sci-fi movies on Netflix. It's just crazy. So, Kye, what I'm trying to say is, I just want somehow the people that are listening to this podcast to know the details of how Zane was killed, and how you lost your legs, how you got paralyzed. I mean, it's just it's incomprehensible.
So I'm going to give you a good idea in terms of both what people have said and what actually happened.
Yes,
so
please do.
From the perspective of Matt Rack is on record for saying it seems clear to me, because there are firefighters.
Who's Matt Rack?
Sorry, Matt Rack is the General Secretary of the Fire Brigade Union.
Okay.
So he's the highest ranking official in the Fire Brigade Union. And what he said, it's always useful to start with from the question you've asked from this point. He said, it seems really clear that the toxin was released from the unregulated landfill adjacent, and ultimately that led to Zane's death. Now, this is, as I've said, the horse's mouth. So what happened was this area of secret landfill, because we had no idea about it, Eddie, this area of secret landfill had been a problem for the authorities for years. And when they built the cabin that Nicole told you about, because they were aware, they decided, we'll protect ourselves by putting a gas-proof membrane in. This cabin is no more than 10 yards from where Zane was killed. Okay, on the night when this happens is the water table rises in the landfill, and various the water comes from the landfill, because we'd already worked out and informed the authorities, look, we're not getting flooded by the river. The road in front of our house is dry. The water is coming from the rear, from the land at the rear. So Matt Rack has made clear the water came from the land at the rear, bubbled up in our sub-basement, gases came into the house was infused with hydrogen cyanide, couldn't get out, QED people died. Now, Nicole is far too well upset, but she wouldn't say. She had to do CPR on her own son, Zane. And I'd want your people to understand the strength and appreciate the strength it takes to do that. You look at Christian Eriksen when he collapsed in the Euros, and I'm sure many of your audience will be aware of that. During the Euros, Christian Eriksen collapsed on the football pitch, and the crowd and the world went silent watching the match. Well, that wasn't Christian Eriksen's mother doing CPR on him.
In a basement full of cyanide, you know.
In a house. And Nicole had to do CPR on her, screaming for Kye, for me, and I'm unconscious in a room that's literally 2 yards away from where Zane was found by Nicole. Now, Nicole managed to do CPR and raise the alarm. If Nicole had not managed to raise the alarm, I'd have been dead. But what people don't know, Eddie, is this. A lot of people were taken to hospital that night with similar symptoms of poisoning, and the hospital was overwhelmed. And we discovered that through the Freedom of Information disclosures from Public Health England. So this is a real story of pain caused by authorities not telling the truth that they were aware of years before. And there's a term in law called forewarning. They were forewarned. All they needed to say to us in our home is, you are in danger, get out of your house. Because after this happened, the whole area was evacuated for weeks because so many people were unwell and so many emergency services people had to be decontaminated because they had been poisoned. So all of this had to be suppressed. Our neighbours were told, get out of your house because there's hydrogen cyanide. We're going to send a vehicle to pick you up. If you can, list your next of kin, because by the time we come back, you might not be alive, because hydrogen cyanide is odorless, yeah, and it's invisible. So there is no way anybody could know, but they knew the dangers. They knew people would die. The last point I would add to this is all about a child. No child should die in their beds, be poisoned by a gas. My diagnosis is paraplegia due to hydrogen cyanide poisoning. Go back to my point. My point is, we just want the truth to be recognized. People have been told things deliberately that were untrue. That shouldn't happen about a 7-year-old child have his whole human rights stripped from him.
So how did the inquest go, Kye? I mean, how comes all this information didn't come out in this inquest? Because they were saying something about carbon monoxide poisoning from the pumps, and there was sort of 8%, is that right, of carbon monoxide found in Zane's body, which naturally from 1% to 8% is what we all intake anyway.
Yeah, lots of people live happily on a day-to-day basis with twice as much if they smoke, or some people that might be pregnant, which would be women, 22%. So how did this happen? Well, it happened like this, Eddie. On the day that Zane died, all of the information had hydrogen cyanide, and they of course tested for carbon monoxide in our home
3 times.
And what the outcome of that was, multiple times hydrogen cyanide, and there was never any carbon monoxide. The matter was escalated through these chains of establishment, which go through area incident meeting to silver meeting to gold meeting, and then it goes to emergency cobra, the highest level of national security this country has, and it's reserved for things like terrorist attacks. This is how serious this incident was, this assault on our home. After the meeting, the report said, and Port and Down were involved all the way through, as Nicole said. After the emergency cobra meeting, the BBC were contacted, ITV were contacted, Sky were contacted, and all sorts of media outlets. And what was said to them was this: the little boy in Chertsey died from carbon monoxide caused by exhaust fumes from generators and pumps used by the parents, to clear floodwater from their homes. Now, the message that gives to people is there's nothing to see here. Don't give the mother or the family any credence in terms of the kind of outpourings of care and grief, because it seems we're telling you that they're implicated. Now, when that story's gone all around the world, I mean, the truth is never going to catch up. We're in hospital in comas, you know, we can't do anything about it. We're not even seeing this come into the press. And the people in the area that were told evacuate, it's hydrogen cyanide, were explained, don't say anything because we don't want to cause public panic. So there was no mechanism around which the truth was going to get out when you've got all these authorities that are worried about liability, wanting to protect themselves. And that's why I always say, you know, what can happen to people when institutions decide that they're not going to give you the truth.
But also the Tory government at the time were in the pockets of all these right-wing media outlets anyway, weren't they? They, you know, they would do whatever they wanted them to do. And like you said, we've just gone through 2 years of this bullshit that we've just gone through, with the right-wing media just dictating totally the details of this. And like you said, and I hope people can relate to this, because a lot of people have believed what they've heard from these right-wing media things. They've had no, there's no, the majority of people have just accepted it. And this is what you're saying. Once the powerful media get involved in something that is not the truth, that is replacing the truth, it's quite easily to replace that truth with the untruths if they're constantly battling it out. And it's the same thing that's happened to you, Carl, this is, isn't it? The truth has been totally messed around to become untruth. And the people of this world are just, they need to wake up. They just need to wake up to this. So when Zane was, the inquest of when Zane was, the post-mortem of Zane, there was hydrogen cyanide traces found in him.
There's Nicole and I had hydrogen cyanide in our blood. Fact. The situation with respect to Zane, and we don't speak so much about it, but what we can confirm is Zane's post-mortem stated that there's no parental responsibility, no
and ruled out carbon monoxide on the 11th of February.
Because
so,
your pumps wasn't working at the time. That's another thing we need to get into. You had them tested, and some of them wasn't working. Is that true?
Yeah, that's totally true. Cole, you feel free.
We had electric pumps, and we'd hired a petrol pump in case the electricity went, and which was an absolute thing that could have happened next door, and the house behind us, they'd already lost electricity, and so we wanted to mitigate, you know, all we could. But what we didn't realize is that the pump we had hired was faulty, and when it was seized by the authorities and tested by Bureau Veritas in a lab, it was faulty and couldn't work. It could never run. The fuse was what's it called, the choke was fused, and so it couldn't run. And so even with that evidence, they still, and the fact that the post-mortem ruled out carbon monoxide, he still made a square fit a circle hole. It was a masterclass in a cover-up using plausible deniability. You see pictures in the paper of, they circle the pipes coming out of the house. Those pipes were attached to electric submersible pumps, and this is again what the fire brigade are saying. They were first on the scene. They were the ones that came in. They detected hydrogen cyanide. They didn't detect carbon monoxide. The pump, the electric pump, wasn't in use. The petrol pump wasn't
in use.
Only
electric pumps can't generate carbon monoxide, so there's no possible source of carbon monoxide inside our home.
No, Zane was killed by the hydrogen cyanide. There is no, you know, that's the truth.
Hydrogen cyanide is a deadly chemical weapon of mass destruction.
Let's strip away all the concept that has been built over the truth. And the truth is that your little boy was killed by hydrogen cyanide. right? That is it. There is no carbon monoxide involved in this. This is the fact. He was killed by a landfill flood, which chemicals had been buried for years and years and years and years, and that's logical. It's totally logical. There's evidence that chemicals were in this landfill. The road on the other side of your house was dry. So all the things that happen, like with you, with your paraplegic, whatever that diagnosis was, and Zane's death, is caused by flooding from this landfill site, which is full of Second World War chemicals. Anybody that can't put that together in their head is crazy.
Right on the nose, Eddie.
Right? They're crazy. They're mad. They're absolutely mad. And these are two parents fighting for justice for their 7-year-old. Look at that little beautiful boy behind Carl. That's Zane. Look at that little beautiful boy. Tell me, I mean, we're what, 9 years now? Is it 9 years since?
It's 9 years in February coming up. And I would add to what you said, Eddie, that the BBC did a story because a whistleblower approached them, a very senior MOD engineer. It was a story that came out in February 2020. And the engineer said, we dumped chemicals behind Zane's home.
There you go.
Generate hydrogen cyanide. Now, the chemicals and the materials dumped in the secret landfill anyway were ones that would generate hydrogen cyanide. Otherwise, this report wouldn't have been done about the dangers of the land. So these are issues that 80% of people in the UK live within 2 kilometres of landfill, to the point that these dangers are a clear and present danger, which perhaps explains why nobody wanted that truth to get out. In America, they have a fund of $21 billion to protect communities. It's called the Infrastructure Bill, and it protects communities from the dangers of landfill next to their homes. So this is a recognised
welcome to England.
danger.
But Eddie,
welcome to Tory Britain.
Eddie, what Kye hasn't touched on was the morning that Zane was killed. Kye was obviously in resuscitation, and they got me under police guard, and they were questioning me about why I'd killed Zane, why I'd hit Kye, and they were just bombarding me with...
Hold up. Now they're trying to say that you killed your son. You was responsible for the killing of your own son, and you was responsible for Carl's ailment. That's what the police are saying to you.
You can see all the statements from that morning, and they said that I was even a risk to Zane's body.
Bastards.
Exactly. And so I had just all of this on top of me. I was a risk to his body, so I couldn't even go and see him. And this was just the games that they were playing. And yet, if you look at the timings of when I'm being questioned, when I'm under police guard, and the timings of the freedom of information requests, freedom of information that we've got that shows hydrogen cyanide detected 3 times, it shows that they're going into a meeting with the Prime Minister, and there's political pressure to find carbon monoxide as the cause. And so you can see how they're just trying to break us, as well as make, what story, what's our cover, what's this plausible deniability going to be?
Because you're normal working people.
Yeah.
You haven't got millions of pounds. You lived, you protected your family. You was paying your bills. You was paying your rent. You was paying your just normal people. And these, oh my God, I don't know.
Eddie, the institutions
escape me here. There's one thing I want to touch on here, right? Because 9 years ago,
cut in quickly, Eddie.
Go on.
When these institutions turn on us, what you've just heard, and I hope people appreciate, because I know you do, any which way, we have to stop the truth getting out and destroy the people that can tell it. So when Zane had just passed, they literally went straight on the attack, interrogating Nicole. And you'll recall I mentioned the point. What happens when there's tragedy? There's an outpouring from the country. Well, you're not going to have an outpouring on somebody who's suspected.
Well, they planted the seed. They planted the seed.
That's all I want. The point I wanted to. You got it.
They planted the seed, and as we know, over the last 2 years, and the people that have been dismissed and the people that have been held up as conspiracy theories and nutcases, it's all. See, now it's 9 years. The minute we obviously, the people that you were talking to minister wise, like the people, your MP, your this and that, of obvious, are they still around now in politics?
Our MP is Kwasi Kwarteng.
Ah, there you go. Yes, please carry on. Talk.
I'd be crying, Eddie, if it wasn't so true.
Involved in this. And what did he? What happened with? What was his stance on it all? If you don't mind me asking that question, if it doesn't compromise you in any way, this man is the Chancellor of the Exchequer now.
And we have invited him to meet us on Friday to take the petition, because he's at number 11 now, to take the petition to him. And we're still waiting for an answer on that. But we have given him an open opportunity to come and meet us.
And he's your MP?
He's our MP.
He's the MP of what area?
Spelthorne.
There you go, and people. There's your Chancellor. Your Chancellor is the MP of these beautiful people's borough, and he's not even responding one bit towards them trying to get the truth of the killing of their 7-year-old beautiful little boy. I mean, come on, wake up. The sea now has got to dry. It's got to dry now. And what about Liz Truss? I mean, she was environmental secretary at some point. Did you have any dealings with Liz Truss?
We did. And I'm just going to emphasize a point, Eddie, that in our borough, the councillors unanimously voted to support an independent panel inquiry for Zane on the basis that there had been a cover-up. This is a conservative type area, so to speak, and even the elected councillors have said there's been a cover-up and Zane must have an independent panel inquiry. And they wrote to the Prime Minister at the time and said, you must give Zane an independent panel inquiry. So you join the Kwasi Kwarteng situation with what the councillors in the area have called for, and people get it. They get it, and you are exasperated by the fact that why is it? It's been 9 years, and I hope this discussion emphasizes why it's been 9 years. Why do you set 6 Goliaths off against an ordinary family that's naked to all of this that's going on around? Why would you do that?
Yeah, that was such a powerful statement, that was. But I would like to ask everybody that is listening to this podcast now to get on their email and email Kwasi, what's his surname?
Kwarteng.
Why that he is not meeting Nicole and Kye about this incident. I would implore you to send an email to this Chancellor of the Exchequer and ask for the reason why. Please do that. Sorry, carry on, Carl.
I'm just going to add to that, Eddie, in that we are going to meet him. We're due to meet him. So, but what people must ask is that why can't Zane have an independent panel inquiry?
Okay.
And then we're all on the same page in terms of our one ask is for the truth to be recognised, and the mechanism to do that is an independent panel inquiry. And you asked about the situation with Liz Truss. That's a simple one. We sat with Liz Truss when she was Secretary of State for the Environment, and she said, you know, I'm a parent. I can understand the deep depth of the pain, the sorrow and the sadness, and I would want to help you get the truth for Zane. And that's the simple terms of it. And she wrote to us to that effect. So now both those people are in absolute power. It would be a 2-minute job for them to give Zane an independent panel inquiry so that we could get the truth for him. And that's why we march for Zane. Zane must have the truth, and people must be held to account, and anybody that was involved in what happened must face the consequences.
But Eddie, with these unlawful killings, these cover-ups, you see like Hillsborough 96, 97 now, and with Grenfell, there's these numbers attached to them. And with Zane, he's just a number one. He's just one little boy, and we very much feel like we walk alone a lot of the time. But to us, that number one was our world, you know, and we will do and fight for the rest of our lives if we have to for him. But we don't want history to repeat itself. They've got an opportunity to do the right thing. This isn't about finger wagging, but that landfill hasn't been remediated. It's a ticking time bomb for the future. And, you know, using their terminology, lessons need to be learned. This needs to be properly investigated. And Zane's death certificate, you know, the lies that dishonour him need to be put right. You know,
dishonouring your little baby boy. That's what they're doing.
Exactly. He didn't die by accident. This wasn't an accident. Yeah. Zane was lawfully killed. Zane died and the authorities lied. And the evidence is compelling. And all we want is somebody to sit down and look at all the evidence not through, you know, blinkers, not with any kind of public pressure needs to get them to do a duty of candor, to do the right thing.
You just want life justice.
Yes.
Which we're all entitled to.
And
we're all entitled to life. I mean, how do we get this world to step out of this human default mode that we all seem to be in and step within the light of consciousness, which is the truth, just to see things how they really are? I mean, this is so dangerous, and I mean, it's human default mode that's stopping everybody to go forward, which is obviously human default mode is far more easier to control than stepping within the light of consciousness, you know. And human default control, human default is the seed that they plant and they grow, and the light of consciousness can't be touched. So what you've just said on this podcast, to me, is like A and B. Simple as that. Simple as that. And to everybody else that listens to this with an open mind, and the issue that we're raising here, which is the killing of a 7-year-old beautiful boy, okay? That alone should be enough. Without the mother being accused of killing him and accused of whacking her husband that causes him to be paralyzed, it's fantasy. How do we get this across? How do we get the world to see that this is fantasy? How do we get 5 million people joining you on this march to honor your 7-year-old beautiful little boy that was killed by hydrogen cyanide.
You're
Come
doing
on.
it. You're doing it, Eddie. The problem was that we were always silenced because there was the threat of a court case and sub judice. Now we're years beyond. It's you speaking out that's telling the world this isn't right, and that's the only way to overcome these issues, that people can see what the truth is. As you've said emphatically, how can nobody see it? Zane was denied a jury in an inquest. He was denied any investigation. All the knowledge they had when it was discovered that Zane's case went to emergency Cobra, and the coroner was told, get the information. And the coroner's position was always, well, actually, I only want to address carbon monoxide. Carbon monoxide is a fantasy, like you said.
Fantasy.
It never existed. Why are you addressing a fantasy? Well, you do that in order to strip somebody of their human rights.
Yeah.
Zane was stripped of his human rights. He was stripped of an investigation. He was stripped of the right witnesses. He was stripped of the true evidence being made available as to what happened that was known about the data and the evidence surrounding Zane's death. And that's how it was done to us. And this conversation offers an opportunity for people to see what really happened and the process of how that happened from day one, so that they were persuaded never to support this particular couple, leaving them to walk alone and hopefully trip, fall, and never be seen again.
Yeah. But also, you're so humble, the two of you, that you just, it's also your lives. Your lives have been taken away from this as well. You know, you've not only lost your beautiful boy, you've lost, well, I don't know if you have lost faith in humanity yet. I don't know. You know, I hope you haven't, sort of thing, because it's gone. But you've suffered on this earth. I mean, I don't know what I'm trying to say, but please, you know, realise you're suffering as well. You know, I know it's all about Zane and it's about getting justice for Zane, but it's also about getting justice for you two. You know, it's to vindicate you two. It's for you two to sit down one day, look up to the sky and say, we did it.
I mean, like at the beginning, at those early dark days, I prayed so hard that I wouldn't survive. You know, I wouldn't make it through the night because,
can you imagine?
You know, I was only running on adrenaline that I, you know, managed to survive it myself. But, you know, I prayed that I wouldn't survive, and I said to Kye, as soon as we knew, you know, if I'd have known that Zane had gone, we should have just all cuddled up next to him.
Yeah.
You know? But you kind of wake up and you realise that we survive for a reason. We survive because we've got to be Zane's collective voice now. You know, this is our path. We've got to make sure that it's rectified, that Zane can rest in peace, you know, and not be dishonoured. And so that's very much our motivation. We are powered by love. And that's you know, that's the reason that we're still here now, to ensure that Zane's voice is heard, and that his little feet, you know, leave big footsteps here, you know, and this doesn't happen again. You know, this is our future. It's never going to be. It's very much life before Zane died and life after Zane died. This is just our existence now, and we. There's a good known proverb about, if you're walking through hell, keep walking. You know, I know
another one of that where I remember I was in a Vietnamese restaurant. Sorry to take away the thingy, Bob. And there was this little guy who owned a restaurant, and he come over from Vietnam, and he started his life in this country as a road sweeper. Now he owns one of the biggest Vietnamese restaurants in Chelsea. And I said to him, I said, how did you do it? he said to me, he said, when you're on the tiger's back, you've just got to hold on to his tail and not let go, because if you let go, the tiger's just going to eat you, and you've got no choice about it at all. So when you're on the tiger's back, you've just got to hold on, which is what you're saying, really.
Yeah,
but it still doesn't take away the fact that you two deserve peace as well. You know, have they got civilians in any way to sort of how are you received by the sort of different groups of people that you see? You know, people hear you talk and you get these horrible people that say horrible things, and they have you been received totally positively through all this?
Well, you see in the news at this time about the families at Sandy Hook, and they were describing what it was like to be told that the experience of losing their child was a fantasy, it was untrue. And what that does is it opens those that are the victims to abuse, so Zane to abuse, but also the people associated with them. So we would get spat on, you know, in the streets.
Oh my God.
And by people that truly believed that we were part of killing Zane, harming our child. So that's the impact, to answer your question. But all we do here, Eddie,
the best
is like
people, you know, we've also, you know, really met some angels along the way, like yourself.
Yeah, you get some abusers, that you get attack in various quarters, and that can be quite relentless. Like I said, that was deliberate as part of the process.
But we're not worried. We're not worried about the angels.
No, well,
you know, we're not worried about the angels, but we are worried about people that are spitting on two parents.
But it's worse than that. We've had our windows put in and eggs and all sorts, but we don't dwell on it, Eddie.
But is that they're obviously the gardeners of the seed? These people, they're obviously the ones with the watering cans, aren't they? That are just totally encased in this human default mode. If they, even them people, if they just sat down for 2 minutes with an open mind, just to get a fraction of what you've said in it, a fraction of what you've said inside their heads, they must come to the same conclusion as the angels.
We've faced our worst fear. You know, we've had Zane taken from us, and it's not until you are completely broken and stripped of everything that you find your true armor. You find your true strength. There's really nothing that anyone can do.
I was going to echo that, Eddie. You know, when there's lots of people that will be parents, grandparents, etc. To lose a child, as you started with, is the most painful thing that could ever happen. And you certainly are in a place where you're on that tiger. If the tiger eats you, that's nothing you can do about that. But all you can do is hold on. We would fight, all of us, to our last breath for our children.
Amen.
And that's all we are doing, really. We're doing what other people would do, but we're saying that we've had this additional set of armor and warfare waged against us by these institutions when they've turned on us. They've turned on Zane, they've turned on us. For Zane, they were meant to help him to get the truth. For us, they were meant to just allow us to be in a position where we've got the truth and we can grieve in peace, with Zane being honoured. So we can't stop defending the and getting the truth recognised for Zane. It's the only thing that we can rightly do, and whatever kind of life that leaves us with, that will always be the priority. And once we get that truth for Zane, Eddie, that's when we can be the parents that can grieve in peace for little Zane here, which is, he deserves the honour of truth. You know, I mean, just why would anybody do that to a
Well,
child.
we know why they do. We know why they're doing it. That's the whole problem. We all know deep down inside why these people are treating you like they're doing, because it's about corporate institutions, and anything with corporate in it is about money, is about material, worldly attributes. You know, and like you just said there, Carl, I'm a parent. There's going to be so many parents looking at this. So let's break this down. Your child dies through hydrogen cyanide poisoning, and the people and the powers that be accuse you, and the cyanide poisoning was secretly put there. It was covertly put there and never brought to light. This stuff comes into your house, kills your child, makes Carl paralyzed, and the government are saying that you are responsible for Zane's life. Now, come on, people, open your eyes. Just that alone. It's a 7-year-old child, and these are two parents that are fighting for justice for their 7-year-old child that was killed by hydrogen cyanide left by institutions. Please, you've got to open up. You've got to wake up about this. I'm sorry if I'm being over dramatic here or nothing, but that's how I feel at the moment. To tell you the truth, I feel like crying, you know. It's just disgusting. I love you too, man.
It's a national disgrace.
I love you too, man. You're such examples of parents.
It's a national disgrace, Eddie, because if any kind of chemical weapon is roaming around a neighborhood, you've got to care about the humanity of the people that are going to be killed by that substance and harmed by it. Why there was never the thought to do that when there was absolute awareness? Yes, they eventually evacuated the area, but then to leave totally unrecognized the life of a 7-year-old child that had their whole life ahead of them, like our children. To not even in any way, shape or form make any amends, but then to attack the truth of how that child came to be killed, when you've protected your own property no more than 10 yards away from where that child fell. Anybody would have a right to be so disgusted and upset by this, the people that did that, the institutions involved, the government, for not wanting to just turn around and do the right thing. You know, we really, there's always been rules with respect to children, and we tell our children those rules, always tell the truth. The rules at government level was always, you don't mess about and tell lies about children. But Zane's story is one of authorities. Zane died and authorities lied. And the only way people can discover that is by people like yourself that hear what happened and share what happened. And everybody here, I would encourage, please share Zane's story, share the truth, and together we will get Zane the truth. We can't bring Zane back, but we must get him at least the truth, and we as parents must be allowed to grieve in peace.
Sorry, Nicole, carry on.
Zane and I shared a shadow for 7 years. We were completely inseparable, and I couldn't have spent any more time with him or given him any more. It was just a joy to be with him. And when you say you feel like crying, I mean, when you start to cry, you just, they're the tears that come from your soul, Eddie. It's pain, that you just can't explain, you can't breathe, and you can't stop it just hitting you just again and again and again, how you wake up and realize that you're here without him. I can't put into words the pain that we go through on a daily basis without
for
him.
9 years.
And we have to channel it
Every
into
minute of the day for
Yeah.
9 years, you are in that pain.
But we're expected to, you know, the British are very sensitive to child death, and it's like, you know, they almost want to close their ears to it because it's too much to think about. And you know, there's a clock on how long you're supposed to grieve for, but really for us, the world has just stood still. You know, we live that day every day of our life. It is just frozen for us, and we have to be able to grieve and go back to our private lives, and to be able to just kind
Move
of
forward.
work out how we're going to exist, you know, without him until we meet again.
It is existing. I mean, we miss Zane, and we've not said much about Zane, but Zane was beautiful, as you said, Eddie. He was fun, he was clever, a totally adorable child. A guy said to us that your son's the most compassionate person I've ever met. The guy was 80 years old, Eddie. It gives you an idea of who we've lost. Zane was clever, but he's also a black belt leader in Taekwondo. When Zane did one of his gradings, there weren't enough belts to go around. So he said to Sensei, look, can I give my belt to this child, this girl, in the class, and I'll get mine next time, because I know it means so much to her. And he was the only in the group, the only one that was happy to do that. And Zane died. Zane died and he never received his belt. He got it posthumously. But I hope that gives you an idea. And he cared so much about people in the world. The night that Zane died, he'd been out with me because he was worried that the elderly people in a little estate down the road wouldn't get their meds if the area flooded. So he said, come, we can do something about this, Dad. And we had a community meeting, and he was satisfied. We banged off some letters as soon as we got back to the local authority and the MP, etc., saying that you've got to do something. You love talking about this Dunkirk spirit, but we're getting flooded here, and elderly people are suffering. And with respect to the environment, Zane's quoted, he was fortunate, there was an article written about Zane, and he said that people think sustainability and being green is about looking after their gardens, but actually it's about looking after a bigger garden that belongs to everybody. So Zane's got so many lovely stories where he's raised money for charities. He's only 7, so you can kind of see it's not about us, it's just the way Zane's heart was caring for people.
But he was a farmer as well, Eddie. I was in a museum with him once, and there was these 3 teenage girls walking over, and he did this extravagant gambol, and he jumped up and he goes, ta-da, in front of the 3 girls. And they were like, oh, it's so beautiful.
Yeah. He would have definitely been a little heartbreaker, I can tell you that now. So now, after that, what you've just said, I'd like to just, if you don't mind, I'd like to ask the people that are watching this podcast, just for, you know, a little bit of silence. Carl, if you could just move out of the way, and just, can you spend 5 seconds just looking at Zane? And this is who we've been talking about today. That is a little boy that was poisoned by hydrogen cyanide. Thank you, Carl. Right. Can we reiterate and thank you so much for opening your hearts like this. I mean, it's been so touching and just warm and natural and beautiful, and the love that I can feel and see that you've got for Zane, you know, which will happen evermore, that will be forevermore, and hopefully people will be touched with this to join you and support you through these next ventures. I said at the beginning, I want to top and tail this with this event, so this is the towel.
Yeah, so meet us at 10:30 at College Green on the 21st of October. Join us for the rally so that we can get the truth recognised and have Zane have an independent panel inquiry and the 111,000 signature petition handed in at 12 noon at number 10 Downing Street. And at 12 noon, we begin the Twitter storm. So share this with as many people as possible. Hashtag truth about Zane. You just put that on Twitter at 12 o'clock on the 21st of October, and that will create a Twitter storm that will bring more people to know Zane's story. And Zane's story is a simple one of, we must get the truth recognized. It's not finding the truth,
Justice.
It's having that truth recognized so that Zane can rest in peace. None of us should have to die on a lie.
Bless you, bless you. Now, all I've got to say, like I do at the end of every podcast, is you've been weathered. So that's got to be done. And thank you so much. And people, please share this podcast. Please listen to the dates that Kye has mentioned, the Twitter storm, the march on Downing Street, the petition. Where can people find your petition if they want to sign more now?
Truthaboutzane.com.
So I can put this in the description. I'll put it in the description and everything. So all I can say really is, you know, thank you so much for opening your hearts, and I really hope that you get life justice for little Zane. And yeah, please subscribe to this channel.
Can we thank you as well, Eddie, for giving us an opportunity to be Zane's voice together. Thank you very much. Bless you both, man.
Bless you both, man. And hopefully I'll see you at this. When is it? October, your march?
Yeah, 21st of October.
I'll see you there.
See you there, 10:30 College Green, just outside Parliament.
We'll be there. I'll be there. And okay, thank you so much, people. And as I said, please get Nicole and Cole's story out there, and because it's wrong. It's just basically wrong how they've been treated. He's been treated. It's wrong. Bye-bye.